Okay, so let's take a look at the schedule. We are September 12th. Oh, so we're talking about web queries today. You know what? First, why don't we go ahead and do the homework? I think I sent you. Did you get my email? Okay. So it turns out that let's start off just by downloading the sample web queries XLS. X. I don't think this is on my educator anywhere. Oh, yeah. So the question is this the assignment that's due? And the answer is no. This is a different file that's just for instruction in class. So, and it has some information that I think will be of some interest. Hopefully, it'll open. Here we go. Enable content or whatever. All right. So, seems like I want to zoom in a bit here. Maybe not. Can you see that okay? Not too bad. All right, let me tell you what a web query is. First of all, how many of you here have already done something with a web query? Before this class, you've done something with web queries in Excel. Okay, so maybe a third of you. So for those of you who are going, I don't know what a web query is. A web query is a simple idea. It says we want a tool in Excel that knows how to interact with a web server to be able to bring data straight into Excel. And it's been around for 18 years. They're kind of around year 2000 or so. Excel 2000 might have been the first one to have it. Maybe it was 2003 where it came out. But it's been around for a while. And so companies are now kind of getting the feeling that this is a kind of a really powerful tool. You can imagine we're going to send Excel to a website. It's going to get current data from that and just bring it in and let us manipulate it however we want. Just do all that automatically. And so the initial version of the web query was really pretty good. For the way the internet was in the early 2000s. Mostly static content with a little bit of active like JavaScript or LiveScript that's changing the content of the pages. As websites kind of developed, the web query wizard, the tool that does the web query, just didn't ever get updated. And pretty soon it got to the point where just about any site you went to would have all kinds of errors. You try to open up a web page, error. Do you want to keep running scripts on this page? You'd say no, it would keep doing it anyway. And it was kind of difficult to work with. But it would still do a pretty good job once you got through that bit of a headache. So now within the past 8 months or so, Microsoft has said, all right, we're finally going to update the web query wizard. And they have made it way more powerful in two ways. Number one, it works with active content now a lot better than it used to. In fact, it works really well with active content. But number two, they've integrated it into the Power Query environment so that you can actually say, I've got this web query here, and it's just going to become a data source that I could use and even join data from that web query directly to something else that's maybe coming from an internal database or from another website, and do queries that kind of join information across all these different data sources. It's really powerful. As you might guess, that power comes at a cost of increased complexity. And so the whole thing that we're trying to do today, what we're trying to accomplish today is this idea of I want to record myself doing something in Excel, see the code that it generates, maybe make a few modifications to it, and have something fairly powerful. And so what we're really looking for today is simplicity, not great power. Even though the power that we get with the old version of the web query wizard is really pretty good. Now, and now here is actually part of the more difficulty. So how many of you are working with Excel 365 or Office 365? If you've got it from BYU, that's probably the one you have. How many of you have like an installed version of Office 2016? A few of you here too. So here's the problem. Excel 2016 has the old version of the web query. I mean, it's just what was around. It was what was current when Excel 2016 was launched. Excel 365, or the Excel from Office 365, gets updated as we move along, and so now it has the new version. And so you don't all have the same version as each other here in this class, which is going to make this a little bit difficult. And so for the example that we're going to do today, the whole reason that I've built this sample web queries sheet is because this has 2 pages that have web queries built onto it. And so this is the old web query tool. You can't generate this kind of web query anymore from the most current versions of Excel. But if you have the web query already in your worksheet, you can still work with it and record. It still does just fine. And so we're gonna see how to use this to accomplish the homework. Now we're gonna see how to use this for our example in class today. But to accomplish the homework, which I want to do together in class, we're going to use the new tools. Now, if you're on 2016, I can show you where those new tools are, because the new tool is kind of there that you could get to, but it wasn't the main web query interface. So let's go ahead now and do the homework. So to do that, I am going to go to my educator. Maybe I'll just follow the link inside of the web query assignment that's due today. So I'll click on web query. I'll follow that link. And I will download this create web query r7.xlsm. Got to save it somewhere. Maybe I'm going to save it somewhere besides there. I'll save it in downloads. Save. And we'll open it. Okay. So we want to get to the point where everyone has this file open, enable editing and enable macros. And then it should show what we need. Automatically pops open this assignment task, but you don't really need to have open. I'll come to the assignment tab and I will open the instruction sheet, and that should give me the content that I'm after. So the assignment, again, we see from the assignment tab, show instruction sheet, and that will bring up the detailed instructions for this assignment. Now this first assignment does not require any VBA. The whole idea here is just I wanted you to get a little comfortable with the idea of a web query before you came to class today. Then we've got this kind of hybrid mixture where some of you have one and some of you have the other, and so we said, you know what, just hold off till today. How many of you did the assignment already somehow and got it to work? Good. How many of you tried to do the assignment and couldn't make it work for the life of you? Okay, so we're here for you today. How many of you are going, I'm glad you got that email because I hadn't done it yet? Up half, okay. So good, that's where we are. All right, so here's the assignment. Create a web query to retrieve a quote from the Founding Fathers website. Who knew the Founding Fathers had a website? foundingquotes.blogspot.com. This site displays a randomly selected quote on each request. Accordingly, your workbook should show a new quote each time the web query is refreshed. So you'll get the feeling. Here's data that changes just by the fact that I refresh. It gets the most recent data every time I refresh the query. Your web query should return the data into A1 to A5. That's wonderful. Change the name of the worksheet to quotes. So it should have a quote. It should be quotes. You do not need to write any VBA for this assignment. You're only making a web query. Okay. So let's then see how to do this. Should I like reduce my resolution so you can see better, or are you okay to see? Any VBA we do will be large because I can increase that font, but as you look at the menus up here, is that okay? In the back, you can see this stuff okay? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and maximize Excel so I get kind of my full menus. All right, so I still don't get the full one. So over here, get data from web. Here it is, from web. That's the one that we're after. So when I click on this, this should bring up the new web query wizard, which just has a place to drop in a URL. It's a pretty simple looking interface. Now, for those of you, when you click on the from web in this first group on the data tab, if you get a different looking tool, if you get one that looks more like this, then I'm going to have to help you find, I'm going to have to help you find the right tool. So if you get one that looks something like this, it actually brings some kind of web page up for you to see. How many of you have that happen when you click from web? So it's a few of you. Okay. So I'm going to try to talk you through what it takes to get to the right content. And to do it, I've got to come look at someone's Excel 2016, which I know you have right here. So let me, if you can just, do you have it open? No, just any Excel workbook will do. Go to data for me. And it's new query, right? Click on new query. Right. And then, no, just click on it. And then from other sources. And then from web. Okay, so the path that you want, when you click on that from web, you don't see this box, cancel out of whatever you had, and go to the data tab, still on the data tab, and there should be a choice called new query. So for those of you who didn't get this, do you have that option, new query? Over to the right a little bit more. So you'll choose new query, and then down about most of the way through that menu, there should be another choice that is from other sources. Do you see it? From other sources, are you getting it? And then once you open up that choice from other sources, there should be one that says from web, yeah? That will take you to this same tool. Okay, so for those of you who didn't, who don't have this newest version of the web query as the primary source, on the data tab, you go to, what is it? New query. From other sources, and then from web, and that should bring you up to this same interface. Is there anyone who now isn't getting to this particular tool? Okay. So now we should just be able to put the URL in, and the URL comes from the assignment, foundingquotes.blogspot.com. I'll just copy and paste. Say okay, it's now, let's see, use anonymous access for this content. Sure. Connect. So that's one of the new things that's more powerful here, is that you can provide some kind of credentials to get into sites that aren't just, open and such. And so now, I've never seen this. Here are your choices, what you want to bring in. Either this thing called document, which I have never seen any value in. I'm not even sure what it does. If I choose the second one, it will bring the table that's available on that. In fact, let's just go and quickly take a look at that website. You don't really get the beauty of it, through Excel, but here's kind of nice looking. Oh yeah, you're right. Anyway, there it is. If we refresh, we get another one, Constitutional Convention, George Washington, whatever, okay. So, and what the student has pointed out here is that I can come over here to web view and kind of see how this looks on the web. There we go. I'll come back to table view. I'm selecting that table. Here's the data that's there. I'm ready to load that data, and that should create the web query right here in Excel. And if everything works right, once that data comes in, I should be able to just refresh, hit refresh all on the page. On the data tab, refresh all. This is Courage by John Paul Jones. Hit refresh all, and now it's brought in something else on bureaucracy from Thomas Jefferson. So that's the idea of the web query. And at this point, this assignment is done. I'm ready to submit it. I can come to assignment, click on submit, and it should go through and give full credit. If you get anything less than full credit, and some of you did, then just send it to email to the TAs, hey, you gave me less than full credit. They'll take a look at your score, and they'll just bump it up to full credit. Oh, thank you, yeah. When I do that tool, it generates a new worksheet. And so I've got to make sure that I've named this quotes. And that is necessary so that the grader knows where to look to find the data that it's looking for. So thank you for pointing that out. Question here? Yeah, so the question is, I've submitted this a couple of times. You get 2 submissions on this, but not 3. So if you had 2 submissions and you didn't get there, that's fine. Yeah, just email the TAs and kind of tell them that tale of woe, and they'll send the workbook to them. They'll take a look at it, and they'll record full credit for you. Question here? The question is, do you get 2 submissions on all these assignments? And the answer is yes. I used to give you like 3 submissions on homework and then 1 submission on the project, but folks just had a hard time keeping track of it. Now, when do I get multiple submissions? And I said, look, we'll just average it out, 2 submissions on everything. So yeah, even your projects, the ones that really count towards your grade, you'll get to do it, get the feedback, and see what it says, and then make another attempt at it. So the question, final and midterm, and the answer is final and midterm are testing center there are multiple choice in the testing center, 1 submission only. Yeah. I used to give a coding final exam where you came in for 3 hours to do a project in class. It was really hard to grade. Nobody liked it. The students hated it. I hated it. Now I give you the final and testing center. The students still hate it, but I don't hate it anymore, so we've improved things there. Okay, there's a question over here. Yeah, so I was just going to let you know, Yeah, that's. Oh, well, you may have got an old one. Oh, very good. So apparently I've updated that. I know I did some work on some of these assignments. I didn't remember doing that one here. So yeah, for the recording, that was some question. Sounds like a student had an old file. So if you're dealing with that, just make sure you've downloaded recently. Okay, any other questions? And student, if you have submitted twice already, just send that to the TAs and they'll bump your score up. All right. Okay. So the idea here then today is we want to do something in Excel that takes advantage of this web query. We're going to use not the one that we just saw, kind of the same idea, building a web query, and then we'll be coding it to modify it. But we're going to use the old web query tool to do that. So let's go ahead and start with a brand new worksheet. So I'm going to close off this homework assignment. I want to save it, not really. I'm going to leave this one open because I've got to. In fact, here, why don't I just do this? Now I'll make a new worksheet. So file, new worksheet. Zoom in a bit. Control home. All right. What I would like to do is I would just like to pull some financial data from finance.yahoo.com. I would like to be able to, let's just say we need to do some analysis about what's happening in after hours trading. So I'm going to compare the prior close, the prior closing price for a set of stocks with the opening price for today. And I want to be able to look at those and say, did this thing go up during after hours trading? Did it go down during after hours trading, or was it flat during after hours trading? And so I'm going to need a ticker. Is cool a particular, oh, you're giving me a ticker. No, I'm just giving the labels now, just talking about the data that I need. I'll need a set of tickers. We can use cool if you want here in a minute. I'm also going to want yesterday's close, so I'll put this as prior close. I'll want today's open. I'll just call that maybe open. And then maybe status. So we are going to provide the set of tickers. So let's go ahead and put in here my very favorite ticker, Southwest Airlines, LUV, feel the love. Google, Apple. What did you say? Cool? What is cool? XOM? Oh, maybe we'll find out. ExxonMobil, American Express, I don't know, Ford, GM, MSFT, you say? Okay, yeah, we can put a bunch there. And the idea is that for whatever analysis I'm doing, I've got to go kind of pick this up every day, and maybe I've got several hundred of these tickers that I'm watching, and I'm trying to collect this data daily to be able to see what is the, what kind of trends are we seeing in after-hour trading. Now, I'll need a website to get this data from, so let me go ahead and go to finance.yahoo.com. And somewhere over here is a ticker lookup. Here it is, quote lookup. And I'll just put in Southwest Airlines here. Well, let's go ahead and let's put in cool. See what happened with cool. What does cool do, by the way? Makes what? Skin grafts. So previous close, oh yeah, that's a big drop. Previous close was $20.45. The open was $18. So yeah, usually the difference between the close and the open and after hours trading is a few cents difference. That's a pretty big drop. 10% drop. Okay, so the information's right here. So I'd like to be able to pull this information in and extract off those two pieces of information, bring them into my summary table, and then make some difference. This status is, was it a winner, was it a loser, or was it flat in after hours trading? We want to put one of those three words in there. And then we'd like to make this kind of work all the way across. So you see the problem, you see the task that we're setting ourselves up to do today. And remember that the goal of today isn't so much about learning how to do interacting with websites. The goal today is we want to set ourselves up to record ourselves doing something, see the code that it generates, make some minor modifications to it, and then make it do something more powerful. That's where we're headed. And so We're almost set up. So what we're going to need is we're going to need to have another sheet in here with a web query. And that's why we still want to have this sample queries open. Now there's a couple of different ways that I can ask for the data on this web sheet. One is to say, listen, just give me all the data. Take all the data that's on the sheet and dump it into Excel. And that would be everything. Well, it won't be graphics, but like watch list, my portfolio, all this text we're going to show up in here. Alphabet, Inc., Google, whatever these numbers are. That's all going to show up. The second thing that I can ask for is I can say, I don't want everything. It turns out that the data that I want is just in the tables. So this initial version of the web query wizard said, it might be that our folks are just interested in the data that's rendered in a table, the actual HTML tag that we use to organize table data in a web page. And so I've given you two pre-built queries that are set up for each of those two ways. So one is the whole page, so WQ web query whole page, and WQ tables only. For this example, let's do the tables only. The data will be a little bit easier to work with because it won't have all this extraneous stuff, and the information that we're interested in is right here in these tables. So I'm going to choose tables only, and I'm just going to drag it over into the workbook that I'm working on. That's going to give me a web query on this sheet already built. Critically, what we're after the old style of web query, the simple style of web query. Now, once I've got that WQ tables only moved over, I'm going to close off my other one, and I was actually going to copy it with a control drag. I forgot, so I'm going to close this without saving it because I don't want to lose my initial set of queries. If you want to save this, don't save. All right, so I've got two sheets now. I don't like the names of these. Let me come back and name my sheet one. I'm going to call this tickers. And then WQ tables only, I'm just going to call web query. It's important for me to give myself these names because we're about to record ourselves doing stuff back and forth between these sheets. And whatever names I have here on the query, or on these sheets, is going to show up in the code. So if these are just named like sheet 1 and sheet 2, sheet 3, it's going to be a lot less clear in my code what's going on than if I've got them named with something meaningful. Okay, so how are we doing? Are we all right? Now is the time, if you're saying I'm not quite caught up to here, to raise your hand and say, slow down just a second. Okay, so we got a few folks here. So Parker, if you can kind of give a hand here. Raise those hands again. All right, so let's make sure that we get caught up. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording, and then we'll pick that up again once we're all together. Okay, so this web query sheet has a web query built into it, and we just need to record ourselves modifying the web query. So let's think about the process. What we want to do is we want to say, so this web query right now is set up to bring, well, it's actually not even set up for the right web page. It's set up for some other web page. But we want to be able to bring in information from Southwest Airlines. Get the prior, close, the open, and then figure out what the status is. And that's it. We'll do that once. And so when we run it again, we'll have it say, all right, now we're on Google. Modify the query to pull data from Google, get the information from Google, bring it in. Next time it runs, take the ticker Apple, modify the query to bring in data from Apple, and so forth. Ready? Now, whenever we go to record ourselves to record a macro, that's what's going to generate the VBA code that we're going to work with. Before we start, we want to think of a couple of things. The first one is we say, listen, when the user is going to run this macro, where should the active cell be? And so let's think about it. Here's the data. Where should the active cell start when the user runs this macro? Okay, A1 is a possibility, and I think there's a better choice. Yeah, A2 is probably better. We're going to signal, the user's going to signal the ticker I want the data for is going to be the one that's the active cell. And so A2 is great, A3 is great, any of these is just fine. And so far so good. So now we're going to do some stuff, and that'll all happen while we're recording. But we also want to think, when this macro is done running, where do I want the active cell to leave off? And that's important because I have to make sure that I leave off there before I stop recording. So when this is done, pulling in this information for that first ticker, where should the active cell leave off? Any thoughts? A3, the next one down, yeah. And the whole idea is that, get ready to run again. So if the user just wants to do it 3 or 4 times, we can just, run it, ready to run again, and they don't have to move over to the start place and go again. So that sounds great. Okay, so now we're ready to record. We need to have the developer tab showing. Just probably the last time we'll do the reminder unless someone asks for it. If your developer tab is not showing, how do you do it? Go to File, Options, and then Customize Ribbon. Just make sure you've got a checkbox here on the ribbon, the developer tab for the ribbon. So it's File, Options, Customize Ribbon, and then check the right box. All right, so now I'm ready to come right here to record macro. So I'll click on Record Macro, and it's going to say, great, you want macro, you got to give it a name. So let's give it a name. I'll just call this stock data, I guess. Stock underscore data. If you don't put the underscore in, that's fine, or data. The rules here, it's got to start with a letter. It can be any combination of letters, numbers, and the underscore character. That's it. You don't put any space in here. I'm trying to put a period in here. Letters, numbers, and the underscore character. Oh, hey, look at this. You can put a short key on this. Let's see. This is stock data. So let's put, why don't we do this Control S? Oh, wait a minute. What does Control S do already? Not anymore, it doesn't. Now Control S runs this macro. Okay? So let's take a little detour. Let's take a little walk down memory lane. Before I got my PhD, I was teaching this stuff, to corporate training. I'd go around to companies, and we'd get 10 or 15 of their people together, and we'd teach them this stuff. And I was teaching this class, and I had a student who was just a really annoying student. You ever have a class where you've got a student who makes annoying comments throughout and thinks he's clever? You had that? That was every class I was ever in, because that was me. Oh, poor Bob, we'll have to call him back, but I'll forget. Let's put it on mute. Anyway, we had just gone through the code that showed how you would close the workbook and save it automatically without prompting the user. And he asked, hey, what would the code be to close the active workbook, not saving the changes and not notifying the user? There's nothing good you could do with that line of code. But it was as simple as changing one of the arguments from false to true, or from true to false. And so I told him, and we moved on. About 5 minutes later, he goes, we paused for a moment and said, what? He said, well, I just made a macro that closed the active workbook without saving the changes, without prompting the user, and I assigned the shortcut key, Control S. Yeah. And we, like you did, we gave him a little courtesy laugh, and we moved on. Anyway, an hour or so later, I said, hey, let's take a break for lunch. Everyone save your work. And he goes, what? Huh? Ah. He didn't realize it was still active, even though we'd gone to a different example. Okay, so you got to be careful about what you put here. So it turns out every control key is mapped except M. M is free. So you can do Control M if you want, but what I encourage you to do instead is put a capital S in there, and that will magically change the shortcut to Control plus Shift plus S now to run this. Okay, and then a little description, get some data from finance.yahoo.com. All right, now I'm going to say okay. Now, as soon as I say okay, I want to be very careful about what I do here, because now everything is being recorded. Everything I do is being recorded. Actually, even before I press OK, everything I do is being recorded in heaven. But now it's being recorded in Excel too. I've got to be a little extra careful. So I'm already on the ticker I want to start on. I'm going to copy Control C, copy that cell. I'm going to come over here, select my web. So now it has just recorded a line of VBA code that says we're going to copy the active cell. Now I'm switching over here to the web query, and it's just recorded a line that says switch to the web query sheet. Now, I want to paste this into A1. It turns out that when I built this web query, I put it starting in A2 for the very reason that sometimes I like to drop something into A1 as we're going. Is that a question? No. So I'm going to select A1. If by chance your A1 is already selected, you need to click off of it and click back on it so that it will record select A1. It doesn't matter what else you click. It's kind of interesting. The web query wizard is, or rather the macro recorder is recording select G8, select G5, whatever. But if you just like select and go somewhere else, it says, oh, I didn't really need those other ones, and it throws them away. And it only ends up with the last select that you end up with. So don't worry about having extra selects in there. Okay, so now I'm going to paste just by pressing enter, or you could do Control V or whatever. All right, so now I have brought onto the page with my web query the ticker that I want to work with. It's going to be handy for us to have it there. All right, now this next part, I don't want you to work ahead. You may think you know just what you're going to do. Don't do it unless you see me do it. So it turns out that, well, okay, let's go ahead and get to the wizard. So I'm going to now select A2. That's data that has come back from this web query. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to choose Edit Query. So Edit Query only shows up if I'm on a cell that is the results of a query. So anywhere where the data is, these are results from a query. I'll choose Edit Query. Here's where I don't want you to work ahead. So this is going to bring up the web query wizard, and we could come in here and don't do this. We could come in here and we could paste the URL in that we're actually trying to do to get to the data that we want. As soon as we did that, it would take us to this new fancy website that this web query wizard doesn't know how to deal with very well. And we start getting all kinds of error messages. It would say, error in this script. Do you want to keep running these scripts? You'd say no, and it would keep running them anyway. Error in this script. And it might take 10 or 15 clicks to get through all the error messages. And so, but you'll remember that when I said, hey, it's going to record everything we do, that's not quite true. In fact, anytime you open up a dialog box while you're recording a macro, the macro recorder says, oh, a dialog box. I see you need a little personal time here. I'll avert my eyes. And it doesn't pay attention to what you're doing in the dialog box. But then when you say OK, or in this case, when you say import, it takes a look at how everything's configured, and it says, great, now that's how it's configured. And it will record that configuration that you've just done. So the point is, it won't record us changing the URL. It's going to say whatever URL is there is the one that we're going to have when we're done. So even if I was to paste in the full URL for like Southwest Airlines, it wouldn't do what I need because it would just be configured for Southwest Airlines now. You see what I'm saying? It won't update it. It doesn't record the updating. It just records the new value. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to click import. So all we did was we right-click, we said edit, and now we're going to say import. Because remember, the macro recorder doesn't pay attention to what's here, what I'm doing here, but when I say import, it's going to say, okay, how is this configured? Let's go ahead and record that. And that'll give us the code we need to modify this web query. So we'll click on import. And it will bring in that data again from this website that's already there, and hopefully it won't take too long. It's actually a website that I wrote just to kind of look like it's got some data showing. It should be okay. All right. Now, the trouble is, our next step is to actually copy the data that it brought back, but we haven't brought any data back yet, so we're going to stop recording at this point. So go ahead and click. There's a stop button. The record macro has now changed to stop recording. We'll click on stop recording. Now we're not done with the whole thing. We're kind of up to this first part. Very important to remember to stop recording. One day I was doing some kind of analysis and started recording a macro to do something, and my wife called me. I was newly married. My wife called me. Not as true anymore, but now when my wife calls me, I can probably keep thinking about two things at once. But then, as newlyweds, when she called me, I put everything else out of my mind and just focused. Anyway, we talked for a few minutes. When we were done, I could have completely forgotten that I was recording a macro. What was I doing? I don't remember. Doing some analysis. I went back and worked for another 3 or 4 hours, recording everything I did. I wrote thousands and thousands of lines of VBA code. I felt very productive. I mean, it was worthless code, but it was, it looked productive. So it's important to remember to stop recording. All right. So let's go ahead and take a look at the code that we've generated and kind of see where we are. It'll look a little bit frightening, but as we look at the code, you'll say, hey, this isn't too bad. Okay, so there's several ways that we can get to the code. Here's the easiest way when we're just starting out. So here on my developer tab, I'm going to come to the second button in macros. This is a list of macros. I should have one macro. It should be pretty easy to locate. There it is. There's just one. It's called stock data. That's what I called it. Now, if I run it from here, it's going to try to run those steps. No good will come of that. And so I'm going to choose edit. I want to edit this macro. So I'm selecting stock data. Since there's only one that comes up as selected, I will choose edit. And that will now bring up my Visual Basic editor, and it will show me the code that I just recorded. So here it is. So this is now the VBA sub-procedure that we had recorded. We wrote a couple of simple sub-procedures on our first day of class. It was just enough to kind of get some code executing. But it's the same thing here now. It begins with the keyword sub, ends with the keyword end sub. Everything between the sub and the end sub is the set of instructions that we're making. That's our macro that we're building here. And so it's sub, and you'll recognize the name of the macro right here. These parentheses, we'll learn what they're for later, but there's nothing in them now, and that's just fine. Now, these next several lines are what we refer to as a comment. Single quote, starts with a single quote, and that indicates everything after the single quote is just a note to some future programmer. The interpreter looks at that, goes, comment, great, skip it and move on. It doesn't even try to understand it. It's just a note. I love the notes that it generates. In case you just missed it up 2 lines earlier, this is the stock data macro, okay? But that's helpful. Here's the note that I typed in, the comment that I typed in. Here's one that's genuinely helpful. It says, hey, when this was recorded, there was a keyboard shortcut on this macro, Control plus Shift plus S. Oh, that's good to know. Now, that could get changed. It's not necessarily that it's going to still be connected, but when it was recorded, at least that's what it was. And so now we've got the lines of code that we recorded. The very first thing I did was I copied the active cell. And here's how it is. Object, selection. It's the name of an object that just says, hey, whatever's currently selected. And then what do you think this is? Property or method? It's method. It's a copy. It's an instruction. So it's saying, hey, listen, selected thing, whatever you are, copy. You know how to copy. And here's one of the really great and powerful things about object-oriented environments is that this selection, when the selection is referring to a range object, as it is in this case, copy is the kind of code it takes to copy a cell or a set of cells. But what if the selection was a chart? You think a chart has a copy method? It does, but it's totally different. It's still selection.copy, but it's doing something completely different because it's copying all this information about a chart. But conceptually, to the programmer, it's the same activity, just whatever is selected, copy it. And so even though it's completely different code that's happening in those 2 cases, that's great. So here it is. First thing, selection.copy. Let's look at the next one, sheets, webquery.select. The great thing here is this is stuff we did, so I can connect on the code that I'm seeing here with the activities I just performed. So what does this one do? Yeah, here, let me say it a little different way. It says, listen, out of all the sheets, out of the collection of all sheets in this workbook, there's one called web query. This refers to that object, and it calls its select method. It tells that sheet, select yourself. And it does. It knows how to make itself active. Then we're selecting a range, identifying the object, calling it select method. And this one's a little interesting here because now you see the paste, that's right. But it seems a little strange to me that it's not the ranges paste method, but it's the sheets paste method. Whatever the active sheet is, just paste. That's how the code was written. We don't have the control over the guys who wrote this code, how it works. But when you paste, you say, listen, we're going to paste to the active sheet. And depending on what's on the clipboard, it'll paste differently than whatever object is there. So it doesn't happen to be to a cell. You paste to the active sheet. That's fine. This next one's really the first one that I would expect you to look at this and go, wow, this doesn't make any sense at all. So, you know when you press Control-C when you copy a cell, it gets little flashing lights that go around it, like some people call them marching ants around the cell. When that happens, Excel is in a special mode. It's in cut copy mode. Excel behaves differently when you're in cut copy mode than it does when you're not in cut copy mode. How does Excel behave differently? Can you tell me anything that's different about Excel when you're in cut copy mode? Yeah? Yes, so the comment is, when you're in cut copy mode, when you press enter, it pastes. If you're not in cut copy mode and you press enter, it either commits the change you're working on, or it just advances to the next cell down. Yeah, so Excel behaves differently depending on the mode that you're in. Because we just pasted this, it says, oh, we're done with cut copy mode. Take us out of cut copy mode. It's interesting that it actually records that, because even if it didn't record it, it would exit cut copy mode anyway. So we could get rid of this line if we wanted to, but as you're just beginning, the whole idea here is we want to make as few changes as possible to this code. So we're going to leave it as it is. It's just fine to have it there. Oh, here it is, cut copy mode equals false. Then we selected A2, and then we did the query editing. And this whole block here is what it recorded when I edited the web query. Remember, all I did was say edit that query and then import. And this is the block that it recorded, because it looked at how the web query is configured and said, record the current configuration. So there's a couple things here that are new. First one is this idea of a with block. So with and with. So kind of similar to sub and sub. It's a defined block, but this says, listen, we're going to manipulate several properties or methods of a single object. And so instead of writing the object.method, object.property every time, it says, listen, here's the object, and then we'll manipulate several things about it. So this says with, and then whatever comes after with has to identify some object. It says the query table that's behind the selection. So that query object, that thing that knows how to talk to a database, or how to talk to a web server, is called a query table. And which query table is it? It's the one that's associated with the currently selected cell. That's why we had to be on a cell that was the results of a query. Now, this starts with a dot. Interpreter, just put this reference in front of it. So this really is just shorthand notation. It makes the code a little bit more readable. You say, aha, I'm doing a bunch of things with this object. Starts with a dot, that's what I'm talking about. So here it's changing the connection. Aha. Now here's where we're going to make our first change. So you'll notice that it has two things. First of all, the connection says, this is not a database connection. This is not a connection to a text file. This is a connection to, this is a URL. This is a connection to a web server. And so we got to make sure we don't accidentally copy over or get over URL semicolon. That's important. But the next part here is just the URL that we're going to access. So I'm going to delete all of that. So it just says URL. And then I'm going to paste in the URL that I had. Oh, you know what? Let's do one thing before I do this. You do Windows plus here. Zoom in a bit. I just want to simplify this URL for us. So it turns out that if we look at this finance.yahoo.com/quote/cool, that's the URL. This question mark says, hey, anything after this question mark, or I should say that gets me to the resource on the server, anything after this question mark is a parameter telling that server something about what to do once you get to that resource. So the first thing that looks a little unusual to me here is that in the resource, it has the ticker, and then it says P equals that same ticker. What do you think? Do you think I need to have that in there? No, I don't. So I'm going to just, it's my guess that I don't need that. And whatever this other thing over here is .tsrc, I don't know what that is. I don't want to have to deal with that. And so what I'm doing here is I'm saying, you know what? I just want to get rid of the stuff that I think might be extraneous and see how it behaves. So I'll execute that and see if it still brings up the same information. And it looks like it does. Zoomed in, so it's a little hard to scroll, but yeah, there it is. You can see the ticker right here. Okay, and then just for kicks, let me change it to a different ticker. I'm going to put in love here. Just make sure that it successfully navigates to a different ticker, and then I'll feel pretty comfortable about that. Yeah, and it's bringing up the information for Southwest Airlines here. So I feel pretty good about that. All right, so this is just going to be a little simpler than we had before. Even if we had to work that URL the whole way it was, we could have done it, but this will simplify things for us. So I'm going to copy this URL, and I'm just going to come and paste it right into my code. So URL semicolon, Control V. So now I have successfully modified this web query to pull data in from a different URL. But what's the problem? Yeah, it's hard-coded. So right now, what is the computer looking for? It's a little sad, but the computer is literally looking for love. And so each time I run this, even though I have code that pastes whatever ticker was in the active cell into A1, I've got to do something to tell it, don't just look for this one, go pull the value off of A1. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to backspace over, I'm deleting the love. I'm backspacing over the ticker, I'm leaving that slash there. And now I've just got to tell it, here's a string literal. Remember these double quotes? We talked about them last time. These are just characters that VBA is keeping track of for me. I'm going to come here, and I'm going to want to put a couple spaces. We've got to do something right there, but put a couple of spaces. How do I refer to the value of range A1? What syntax do I type in here? Someone take a bold stab at it. Range, open parenthesis, open quote, A1, close quote, close parenthesis. That gets me to the object. Dot value. Very good. Okay, so now I've got a string literal, this collection of characters, and I want to put on the end of it whatever value is sitting in A1. But I can't just lay those two next to each other. I've got to give it some instruction that says, make these two things go together. It's an operator. That's chapter 7 from the textbook. We didn't cover it in class on Monday, but there's a string operator for gluing things together. The term is concatenation, to concatenate these two values. And what's the symbol? Ampersand. Okay, so now when I leave the line, it should verify that that line is okay. If I have an error here, it'll show in red. Anyone get a red line when they left the line? If you did, you probably missed a quote or didn't quite have the ampersand in the right place or something. Looking great. Okay, so now when this code runs, it says, listen, we're going to modify the query table, and the property we're going to modify is the connection of the query table, and we're going to change it to be finance.yahoo.com/quote/ whatever ticker symbol is in A1. Beautiful. Okay, now the rest of these things, we don't need them around here. Remember, this is just the way the web query is configured. The only thing we need to change about it is we need to change the ticker. The rest of the stuff, it's just telling it to be the way that it already is. So if you want to, you can delete everything down except the last one, because and just take a look at them. It turns out this command type right here, this actually, in 2013, the macro recorder started recording this. It didn't record it before, and it's invalid syntax. I'm not sure whatever happened to bring this in. This line, if we run this line will cause an error. So I'm just going to comment it out, change it into a comment. So we can kind of see it there, but remember to record it there, but it's just invalid syntax. I'm not sure what they were trying to do. Selection type here. Oh, the selection type is we want all the tables. Remember how I said this is the query that brings all the tables in? That's the selection type here, all tables. What kind of formatting do we want? Do we want to try to bring in the fonts and everything? No formatting. This is just the way this query was already configured. And then, all the rest of these steps, right down to this one, is just the way that it's configured. I'm going to leave these things in place because our whole goal here is to make as few modifications as possible. But we could delete everything between the connection and this refresh. Can't get rid of. Why? What's going on with the refresh? Yeah, the refresh is a method. I'm now telling this web query to refresh itself. It needs to freshen up a little bit. Go take a shower, put on some deodorant, refresh yourself, and get the data from the web server. Now this is interesting right here. Let me just talk you through this one. Background query equals false. This is a parameter that's being sent to the method. So the method is refreshing, but we're telling that method how to behave. So it says, listen, this method says there's a couple of parameters I could take to tell me the way that I should behave. And here we're saying, hey, this background query, false. This is not a background query. What does that mean? What would it mean if it was a background query? Any thoughts? Go ahead. Okay, so the comment is, maybe that means it's just going to kind of continuously query. Maybe every minute or so, query again. Good guess, but wrong. Another brave soul. Yes, you can do other things. If it's a background query, that's what it says. You know what? It might take a while for this web server to respond. Just let it go. And I'll keep on working with what I'm working on. And so in this case, if we have background query true, then it says, hey, go get that data, and then it moves on. with whatever other code we have here, which we've got to still record, it would go on and do. What's the next part that we're going to do? Yeah, we're going to copy the information that it pulls back and put it over to the sheet. So what do you think? Do we want background query false so that that's kind of double negative to me, or do we want it true? What do you think? Yeah, false. This should not be a background query. If it was a background query, we'd say go get the data, and before the data comes back, we'd go copy the data there from the last call that it made. And so background query false is what we need to have. This is not a background query, it's a foreground query. Stop while this code comes in. Okay, at this point, we're ready to run the macro and see that it works. The only I want to emphasize, we talked about this a lot, but we only made 2 changes. The one change that we made was we changed the URL to go to the right site and be dynamic, to pull the value in from range A1 where we pasted it. And we commented out this command type 0 just because that was an error. Would you know this was a problem if we didn't comment that out? Yeah, because you'd try to run it, it would get this line and would go error. You would Google this and you'd find people talking about it. You know, what is this? Here is someone made a mistake in the macro recorder and they never fixed it. How could they have never fixed it? I have no idea. How could they have never fixed this? They never did. Okay, it's probably an intern who was working on the macro recorder. Okay, so now I'm going to come back to my code. Now, remember, the important thing is that we are asking the user to signal to us how they want to signal to us which ticker they want to pull the data in from, and how do they signal that? Yeah, by selecting the cell before they run the macro. So not only can we not run it here on this sheet, we need to come over here to the tickers sheet, and we got to make sure that we're on a symbol. What should we do? Should we do cool? Let's go ahead and do cool. So I'm on cool, and now a couple ways I can run it. I can come and choose it off the list of macros here and run it. What was the shortcut key? Control-Shift-S. Control-Shift-S. And it's going to run that code, and once it's brought that data in, it should end up on the web query sheet showing the code. And here it is. I'll go ahead and zoom in a bit here. So here it is. We've pasted the ticker here into A1, and it now has brought the data. Here's the previous close, and here's the open. And there's that $2 gap that we saw when we looked at the data. Does this work for everybody? That's a bad question. Is there anyone this did not work for? Comment. We've got a few folks here. Let's go ahead and pause the video and take a look. Okay, so the error that I just want to show folks that might be watching, because it was a common enough error, is that if you copied the wrong web query out of our sample web queries, you ended up with something here that said Excel entire page. And so we want to make sure it says Excel all tables, so it just brings in the tables. So we'll be able to move on from there. Okay, so now our next step is we want to record our process of bringing the data over. So we would have been right here on A2. So let's everyone get back to the web query sheet, be on A2, because that's where we left off from recording. And now we'll pick up and we'll record another macro to kind of continue where we left off, now that we actually have the data that we can work with to bring in. So developer tab, come back to record macro, and we're ready to move along. So I will click on record macro. Macro 2 is going to be a fine name. We're going to delete the name of the macro. We're just trying to get the steps here, so macro 2 is fine. Okay, now I got to get the previous close. So I will click right here on B2, and it's going to record a line that says range B2.select. That's exactly what I want. Now, don't work ahead with me on this one, because it's not what you think. I'm going to come back here to the tickers symbol, or tickers tab. It's going to record, go to the tickers tab. Now, here's where I hope you're still active on this column. If you aren't, if you have moved off of this column, you need to select this column, but it's going to record selecting that column, so we'll have to modify the code. Hopefully you're already there. For how many of you are already there on a ticker symbol? How many of you are like, whoops, I wasn't on a ticker symbol? Okay, select the ticker symbol, but realize that's going to make a line that we'll have to delete. Okay? Now, don't select anything else yet. Where do we want to paste this value? Yeah, one cell to the right. But if I click on B5, what will it record? Select B5. What do we want to select? One cell to the right. Oh. Fortunately, there's this notation of a relative reference. Right now, we are recording with absolute references. Where you select, that's where you select. Look right here, right below the record button or the record macro or the stop recording button is another one that says use relative references. I'm going to click on that, and that will stay clicked. And so now, when I click on the cell to the right, it's going to record, hey, wherever the active cell, offset one cell to the right and select that one. That's great. Now I'm ready to paste. Did I copy? I never copied. Oh. Okay, I'm still here. That's okay. I'm going to go back to the web query. I'm going to copy. What's that? That's probably a good idea. Let's start over. Let's stop recording. All right, so let's make sure a couple things. I'm going to make sure that I'm on cell A2 on my web query sheet. On my ticker sheet, I'm going to make sure that I am on one of my tickers. It doesn't matter which one, but I'm on a ticker. And unclick relative references. Very good. Let's put our relative references back to the way it was before. And go back to the web query sheet. Okay, now we're ready to record again. Whew. I'll escape from cut copy mode. It would have been okay if I was there, but we'll escape off. All right, so record macro again. Record macro. Macro name, the real macro. All right, I'm going to select B2 and copy, Control C. Select my ticker tab, select use relative references, and then click on B5 and enter. Whew. I got the prior close for this ticker. I'll go back to my web query sheet. Now, before I select B3, it'd be okay, it would do a relative reference. I want to show you kind of a more general technique. Let's suppose this piece of data that I was after was somewhere further down on the page. And I wasn't so confident that it was always going to be in the same cell. You know, it might be either, depending on the data that comes in, there could be more or less data, and instead of being in row number 100, it's in row 103 or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, listen, I want to search for something that I know is going to be close to the data that I'm after. In this case, we've got these labels over here. That's kind of nice. So I'm going to search for the word open. So Control F to do a find, and I'll put it in case sensitive, OPEN. And under my options, I want to make sure I don't accidentally find it somewhere else in some other text. So in my options, I'm going to say I want to match case, and I want to match the entire cell content. So it's looking for a whole cell that says open and capitals included. So now I'll say find next, and it's found that cell. I'll close my search box. The idea is, maybe this was somewhere way down on the page. It'll take me to that cell, and now I'm still on relative references, and when I click off to the right of it, it's going to say, we've just recorded, find the cell that says open, and then select the cell one to the right of it. We'll copy again. I'm going to come back to my tickers sheet. I'm still on relative references, that's good. I'm going to come and select the next column over, and I'm going to paste. Now, I'm almost done. But what I want to do with the status is I want to say, overnight, was this guy a winner, this stock a winner, a loser, or flat? And so I'm going to select D5 and put a formula in here. If equals if the open is greater than the close, comma, this is a winner. Comma, another if. If the open is less than the close, it's a loser. A capital L loser. Otherwise, it must be flat. Two closing parentheses for the nested if. Whew. I'm assuming you guys are somewhat comfortable with at least the if function and nesting the if function. If you're not comfortable with that, just type exactly what I have up there. It'll be okay. And if you're not quite following, go to the recording because we only got a few minutes. I'll hit enter to put that in. And this comes up as a loser. That's right, lost a couple of dollars overnight. Am I done? Last step is get us back over to the next ticker. And now stop recording. It doesn't matter. I'm done. With relative references on because I wanted to say go down and over. You can leave it on, or we're done recording, so you can leave that on. Won't affect anything. But now I should be able to press Control-Shift-S, and that should pull in the data for ExxonMobil. We haven't put it together. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. We're not quite there yet. I meant to say we're not quite there. That was a test. We brought in the data for ExxonMobil. Let's go back and look at the code. Now, I should have a problem because I've got a macro in here I didn't mean to record. I did a bad job on it. So here's macro 2. Let me just get rid of macro 2 as if it never existed. Delete. Okay. So now, this is how it would be if we had just recorded that correctly. So we have the sub and the end sub that gets the web query going. Here's the end sub from our first recording session. Here's the sub for our next one. Watch this. I'm just going to delete the end sub and then the new sub and the comments there as well. By taking this out, the end sub is gone. There's still an end sub. Where is it? Yeah, at the bottom. I've just taken these two that was sub, end sub, sub, end sub, and I've gotten rid of the end sub pair in the middle, and that'll just make it into one macro. So now it's all one macro. Let's go ahead and run it. I'll go back, make sure that I'm on ticker symbol, and Control-Shift-S. And now it's brought in ExxonMobil that gained a little bit overnight, and so ExxonMobil is the winner. Press it again, it'll pull in the data for the next one. Folks, can I have you for a couple minutes? Listen, this is pretty good. Except, and if I only had these 9 tickers, I'd probably do it by hand. Control-Shift-S, wait. Control-Shift-S, wait. But what if I have 900 tickers? What's the problem? My pinky's going to get sore. Pressing Control-Shift-S. So what I want to do is I want to tell it, no, just start at the top and keep going until you hit a blank cell. We can't record this. Let's go ahead and write another sub-procedure that will do this for us. And it's not too bad. Are you ready to see it? Let's go ahead and go back to our code. I'm going to come to the very top. I could put this at the top or the bottom. If you have option explicit there, come below option explicit. If you don't have option explicit, that's okay. Let's make a new sub-procedure. Sub, get all data. Now, so I'm making a new sub-procedure. I'm not recording this, I'm just writing it. This is going to be a few lines. So I'm going to make this one do exactly what the stock data does. I'm not going to copy the code from stock data. I'm just going to copy the name of stock data and put it here on a line by itself. Control V. Now, when I have the name of a sub-procedure on a line by itself, it just says, go run that sub-procedure. Now what I want to do is I want to tell it a couple things. When this one runs, let's make sure we're selecting the right sheet. So sheets, what's the name of our sheet? Tickers. By the way, it's not case sensitive, so all lowercase is fine. .select. Let's make sure I'm selecting the first cell there. Range, R-A-N-G-E, in parentheses and quotes. Where do I want to start? A2. Let's select A2. And now we want to now run the stock data over and over and over again. In programming lingo, that's a loop. I'm going to say here do, that's the beginning of a loop in VBA. And after the code that I want to run multiple times, I'll say loop. So this is just do and loop. So do says start of the loop. It says run stock data. It'll go down there, run all that code. It'll come back up. It finishes, it comes back up here, gets to the loop. Loop says what? Go back to the do and do it again. This is going to keep going for a long, extra long time. I haven't given it a way out. When's this going to stop? Well, never is a long time. Yeah, until something unusual happens. There's a power failure. Well, this code goes down by a line each time. So when it gets down to 1.04 million rows, it'll try to go to the end and go past the end. That will cause it to fail. Nuclear holocaust would cause it to stop. Second coming would probably be something weird. So I gotta give it a way out. And so I'll put it up here, and I can do this either at the do or on the loop side, but I'm gonna say until the active cell dot value is equal to blank. Active cell dot value equals empty string, quote, quote. That's the value of an empty cell. It's a string with nothing in it. It's a string literal with nothing in it. To run this, I could run it right from here, but let's do one more thing. I'm gonna put a button on the page to run this. I'm gonna choose on my developer tab, insert, and then the very first tool here is the button. I'll select that tool, then I will draw a button over here. It says, what do you want to run? I want to run get all data. That's the one I just wrote. We'll say OK. It just says button 1. I can change that to say get. I'll just call it all data. I'll click off of it, and we're now done with the example. I will click that, and it will now make sure that sheet's active. It'll select the first ticker, run the get stock data. That takes me to the next one. It says, is the active cell blank? No. It will go on, move to the next one, move to the next one. It'll take a little while because it takes a while to get this page, this data back. Now the great thing is, while this is running, what am I going to do? I'm going to get a ham sandwich. Yeah, I'll do something else. But I'd like this computer to tell me when it's done. Could I make Excel send me a text message when it's done? Oh yeah, I'll show you how to do that. Not today, we're out of time. But this semester, I will show you how to make Excel send you a text message when it's done so you can come back and get busy again. Folks, that's it for today. So the whole idea here was record yourself doing something, look at the code, make some modifications, and you're off and running. You now have everything you need to do the first project. You can get started on that if you want. Thanks for coming. Class dismissed. Oh, thank you. You're too kind. Stop. Oh, you want to stop? Try control break. Do you have a break key? If not, try escape. And I should have told you one more statement that would let you get out a little easier. Yeah. What you could do, put yourself into airplane mode, and then you'll have an error because it won't be able to get the web page. And that'll stop the code.
I got lost.
Oh, okay, so if you're still with me, you can see the code is completely run. It is stopped, and we've got all the winners, losers, and flats marked here. All right, that's it for today, folks.